session is a burst of energy for everybody, but again, welcome to our conference. You're currently in Nature's Remedy, PI, and the Benefits of Gardening. So if you meant to be somewhere else, it's too late now. You're here with us. We're going to have some fun together. And let me tell you, this is going to be one of the highlights of your agenda. You guys are going to have a great time. So this session is going to be 45 minutes in length today. If we do have time at the end, we may be able to take a couple of questions, but our presenters today are very gracious and have also included their contact information on our end of our slideshow, and we'll also be at the conference walking around if you do have any questions that we're not able to get to today. But before we get in, let me share a couple of disclaimers on behalf of IDF. The first is just that the information presented in any of our sessions is not medical advice, and to always be seeking that from your physician or qualified healthcare provider. And here at IDF, we offer a wide variety of educational programs, including presentations that are developed by healthcare and life management professionals. The views and opinions expressed in any of our sessions aren't necessarily the views expressed by IDF. But without further ado, I'm very excited to introduce our two presenters. I'll introduce them both at once, and they'll take turns during points of today's presentation. And I'll also end today with a couple of resources from IDF. But without further ado, our first presenter, Dr. R. Lawrence Siegel, received his MD and PhD in biochemistry from Washington University. As a board-certified allergist and immunologist, Dr. Siegel specializes in the diagnosis and treatment of allergic diseases, asthma, and immunological disorders in children, adolescents, and adults. Our second presenter, Darcy Gott, is a second-year law student at Stetson University College of Law. She graduated from Colby College in 2023 with a bachelor's in mathematics and French, and since being diagnosed with specific antibody deficiency in 2018, Darcy has been an active member of IDF. For full bios of either of our presenters, you all can access that in your conference application, but Dr. Siegel, I'll let you take it from here.
Thank you very much. It's a topic I enjoy, and I'm glad that IDF invited me to be here. Oops, wrong way. Definition of a great gardener. A great gardener is someone who's killed much more plants than you've killed so far. And a great gardener becomes even greater by killing even more plants. So the message is here: when you're gardening, you lose plants. It's not the end of the world. It happens to everybody. Why you should be gardening. Better tasting vegetables and fruits, especially tomatoes. That's one of my big kicks. There was tomatoes today for lunch. They look nice. Taste, for me, not there. If you want good tasting tomatoes, you have to grow them yourself. Tomatoes grown by farmers are farmed to be able to be shipped long distances without being bruised. Taste is irrelevant. So tomatoes have no taste these days unless you grow your own. Gardening, you can have very safe, ultra-fresh fruit. You know, it says in the supermarket, fresh fruit. Talk about strawberries for a minute. Early in the year, they're grown in a little city outside Tampa called Plant City, and then they're shipped up north. About 6 weeks later, the California farmers put their strawberries in. So all the strawberries people get in the United States are not exactly fresh. They got to get there by train, bus, whatever. So it's not exactly fresh. Fresh fruit is when you go outside and take a blueberry off a bush, blackberry off a vine, or an apple or orange off a tree. That's fresh, okay? And you want to try to do that as much as you can for fruits that you like to eat. There's much less exposure to chemicals. You can grow organically. Indoor air plants can improve air quality. You can grow very beautiful flowers. We'll hopefully show you that at the end. Be very creative in your landscape. Reduces stress and anxiety. Reduces the risk of dementia, like old people like me. Might last longer with the brain. There are lots of studies that show you can get the elderly out gardening. They do much better for a longer period of time. It's great exercise. It burns calories. It makes you sleep real well. Learn about plants, and you meet all kinds of people who are interested in plants, and so on. First of all, if you don't want to kill too many plants, you've got to get the right plant for your right zone. Chicago is zone 5, which is the light blue. Tampa is the light brown at the end there. And we're in 9, and here is 5. The average annual low temperature in Chicago is -20 to -10. Not how low it'll go, but the average. In Tampa, it's about 20 to 30. So it means in Tampa, we get freezes every once in a while, like people up north, but it's not exactly Chicago. So citrus trees, you can't grow them here. You can grow them in Tampa pretty easily. Tulips you can grow here very easily, but forget it in Tampa because it doesn't get cold enough to excite the tulips to do anything. All right, Sustainable gardening is what you want to do. You want to improve the soil health so your plants stay healthy. You want to conserve water, what's called water-wise garden design. So if you have plants that like lots of water, group them together. If you have plants that don't like so much water, group them together so that way you don't kill so many plants by overwatering or underwatering. You want to support the bees, the birds, the butterflies, and all the other animals there who help pollinate. Although rats and mice, not too much in Florida because we have great snakes that take care of them. The more flowers you have, the more bees you have, the more fruit you'll have. And the mason bees are very important for home gardeners. Honeybees are irrelevant should be irrelevant to any gardener. You don't need to raise honeybees. Mason bees are called masons because they build their own nest. Every mason bee has its own nest. They're solitary bees that work alone. Each female is a queen with her own nest. She works by herself, doesn't interact with anybody, and she has about 35 offspring every year. And what's really curious about them is when she has the offspring in this long tube, the ones in the back are female, the ones in the front are male. Nobody understands how she changes the sex when she's laying the eggs or whatever. So it's science is still working on that. They use mud to seal their nests in trees and long tubes every day and night. And one mason bee is worth about 100 honeybees for doing work. A mason bee is very hairy and very chunky. So when it goes into a flower to pick up the pollen, have the nectar, and the flower dumps, the plant dumps its pollen on it, it's so hairy it carries an enormous amount of pollen with it. And the other thing about them is that they go many flowers before they have to stop. Oops. Whoops. To do that. And with the honeybees, when they actually come to your yard occasionally, they go to one flower, get the pollen, go to the other one, and then it's time out for a while because they're very prissy. They have to clean themselves of all the pollen they just picked up, and they're in time out. So they don't do much work during the day. They're always cleaning themselves off. So they're rather difficult to deal with if you want great stuff. Thank you. Okay. Potting mix, if you're doing pots, is a much better potting soil than the potting mix is better than the soil. If it's more expensive, and water crystals are useful for potted plants if you live places where the water doesn't rain much and water can be very expensive. To mulch or not mulch, it saves water, allows for slow release of nutrients, requires less fertilizer. I have an oak tree in my front yard, and I grew up a Florida rose on it, a climber. Florida roses have no disease, but they have very few flowers, and they're very small, and they have no fragrance, but they're like invincible. So over the years, it's about 3/4 of the way to the top. It's about 40 feet up, and I've never fertilized it at all. I just put some more mulch on it every year, and the oak leaves that fall on it, fertilize it. Great way of growing things. So mulch reduces weed growth, regulates the soil temperature. When it gets hot in Tampa, the roots are cool. When it freezes in Tampa, the roots are warm. Soil erosion is eliminated, helps control pests, encourages earthworms, has visual appeal, so you definitely mulch. Get the right tools to start small. Gloves are absolutely necessary for real people, and PI you absolutely have to have. And the last thing you want to do is get cut by a thorn or spike on citrus, pineapple, blackberries, bougainvillea, and everything else, and get an infection and be on antibiotics or be on antifungals just because you weren't wearing a glove. When I go out, I'm in long sleeves, long pants, I've got gloves up to my elbows, hat on, and I dare the plants to try to get me, but they certainly get me every once in a while. One of the great things in life is to squeeze grasshoppers and tomato hornworms. You might ask, my doctor wants to do that. Well, periodically, when we try to get PI patients their therapy, the insurance company says, oh, it's not a covered benefit. Sorry, goodbye, bang. So I wasn't able to squeeze that person over the phone, but I can go out and find a grasshopper, relieve my inner tensions, and squeeze the grasshoppers eating my plants. And tomato hornworms are a real specialty item to squeeze. You can eat a tomato plant in a couple of days, but when you grab them and squeeze them, it's really greeny goo comes out, and it's really fabulous stuff to have. Just a little insight in gardening today. Healing pans and all these things are available, and the best way to acquire this is find someone who's moving in your neighborhood because nobody takes their gardening tools with them. They'll just buy new ones when they go. You get them for pennies on the dollar, but you don't have to buy all this stuff in the beginning. Watering bottles are really good to stay hydrated, particularly in hot climates. Botanical science explains why plants die. You either gave them too much water or too little water. You either gave them too much sun or too little sun. You gave them too much to eat or you didn't give them enough to eat. Or they had a virus, bacteria, fungus, so let's spray it with something, usually copper, and by then the plant is dead anyway. So you have to realize, I keep touching this. I guess I need that. There we go. Okay. So that's the way you use plants. And there are no antibiotics for plants. All you can do is try your best and plants will die. So don't worry. Now, there's always an argument, should you be organic or not? There are many tips and books available how to do this, but you want to start slow and small. If you always used fertilizer before, just transition slowly. You can use homemade compost or buy cattle manure or mushroom compost. Both have no odor. You can grow a whole lot of different crops. Years ago, there was a great craze for square foot gardens, which has kind of gone out of style. They calculated if you had 4 square feet of garden space, either in the ground or in what's called an earth box, you could grow all sorts of things and have very little need for fertilizer, even organic fertilizer. So, for example, you would start with a transplant, let's say a tomato. A couple weeks later, you put some seeds in, maybe peppers or lettuce or whatever. And by the time you're done with the tomatoes, and if the tomatoes have died and done their thing, the new seeds come out, and you just keep repeating this in these 4 little squares, and you grow a lot of food. And see, each plant is having different nutrient requirements. You don't have to fertilize very much, even organically. Rotate crops every year. You don't want the bugs to say, you know, in this part of your house, I'm going to wait till next year where the eggs are laid and get the same plant again. So moving around, you confuse the bugs and have less problems. Few gardeners grow organic flowering plants. I've never met anybody who does that. I've met people who say they do that, but I don't believe them. So most people still fertilize flowers, okay? You're not eating them. You can eat some flowers like daylilies and hibiscus, but I wouldn't, but some people do. If you're going to be organic, you have to use organic seeds, plants, and fruit trees. Hard to find. Some people have them. You can't use synthetic fertilizers, pesticides, fungicides, herbicides, GMOs, and all that stuff. And most of the food you buy is not organic. So only 6% of all food sales in the United States are organic. Fast food places, not organic, okay? All right, seeds or transplants. You've got to determine the correct time to plant transplants and grow seeds. And there are all kinds of books for every single zone, how to do this and when's the appropriate time, but then the weather never cooperates. It may be cold for a while, maybe hot for a while. Sometimes you have to replant. You can go to home improvement stores, you can go to local nurseries, plant fairs, or catalogs. I like big plant fairs. Yeah, lots of vendors, lots of flowers, lots of fruit trees, lots of everything there, and a big variety of plants, some of which I've never seen before when you go to a new place, and it's a lot of variety. Buying from catalogs incurs shipping charges. So your plant may cost $5, but the shipping charge is $20. That doesn't sound so good, but if you want the plant, that's what happens. There's a great website to go to called Dave's Watchdog 30, where gardeners put comments in about every single company that sells things on the internet. And as soon as the company comes on board, someone's ordered for it, and it's ready on Dave's Gardens to tell you they had a success or not. So the first 30 are really good, great customer service. That is, they answer phones when you call up and complain about your plant, and they will replace it free of charge or give you your money back, and they're a pleasure to deal with. But sometimes the best 30 don't carry the plants you want, and you've got to go down the list. You can put your plant vendor in and see what they say. I think a score of about 80% positive and 20% negative I would order from these people, but you got to see what the complaints are about. So if you want to buy gladiolus bulbs from these people, and they have a good record, everybody says the glads are great, but they all hate the roses, buy the glads and don't buy their roses, and that way you're a little better protected. And you gradually, slowly increase your plant total. Let's talk a little about allergies. Many trees, grasses, and weeds are pollinated by the wind. It's light, easily inhaled, and it causes allergy problems. About 30% of the population is allergic to pollens. How to deal with this? Well, you can avoid it, but then you can't garden, so that's not a possibility. You wear a mask. Forget that. People can't wear a mask inside, let alone wear outside, and really no reason to wear an outside. Oral antihistamines can help, nasal sprays can help, allergy shots can help. I tell my patients, you need to move to Antarctica because you're so allergic. Forget about gardening there, but you can hang out with the penguins. They're very cute, fun to be with, but they stink of fish. All right, flowering plants and fruit trees rarely cause allergy problems. So a distinction here. Now, you might be allergic to a peach, pear, or plum, but the tree isn't going to bother you with its pollen because the pollen is very heavy and sticky, and some life form has to move with the bee, a bird, or whatever. So flowering plants and fruit trees rarely have allergy problems. This is the one science slide that I was asked to put in. The United States Infectious Disease Network data set found 3% of patients with inborn errors of immunity have allergic rhinitis. But if you include things like asthma, atopic dermatitis, and food allergies, it gets up to 16%, but it's not 30% like the general population. So some studies suggest that immunodeficiency, particularly CBID, in this one study, you only had 5.6% of patients who are allergic. But part of the problem, they admit, is that skin testing and blood testing may not be accurate in this, and you may need to use other things such as nasal challenges, which is a whole different kettle of fish. So the amount might be higher, but it seems to be immunodeficient patients are, as a whole, less allergic. But every allergist, immunologist, there's people who have CVID or on allergy shots, CVID on biologics for hives and asthma. So, you know, the actual number is still up to. Talk about air plants, and they will soon be distributing air plants to everybody. These are very easy to grow. You don't need any soil. You know, they like the shade if you want to grow them outside. They grow indoors very well. They usually grow 2 to 12 inches in height. They require air circulation a little bit. You soak them in water 30 minutes once a week or mist them every so often. You feed them once a month with a water-soluble fertilizer, and they love it. But you can grow them outdoors. But only in zone 9 or above. So it has to be Tampa or Key West, Puerto Rico, somewhere like that. And some of these things that look like little air plants, you put them outside in those zones, they get about 7 foot tall hanging from a tree. In Florida, we have loads of Spanish moss. It grows everywhere, and you can't really stop it. So these are one of the pictures of some air plants, different colors, and another one. Doctors don't like HMOs, which are health maintenance organizations. Gardeners don't like HOAs, which are health associations. Now, when you buy a house in the development that's being built, you have, at least in Florida, have to join this HOA, which is run by the developer, of course. And various little things you have to do, like cut your grass periodically, don't paint your house black with yellow stripes, don't grow corn in your front yard, don't set up an automobile repair shop in your front yard either. You don't want those things. You're trying to sell houses to other people. Well, fair enough. But then they have these people who work for the HOAs, drive their car around, take a look at your lawn. Well, when we had a freeze a couple years after we bought our house, our cold-resistant plants didn't die, but they got black on top from an injury or cold. Fair enough. And what you're supposed to do is do nothing. So when the next freeze, there's always the next freeze, comes along, that dead part will protect the live part underneath, and your plant will survive the wintertime. And then when it's time, it can't be a freeze anymore, historically. You cut the dead part off and life goes on. Well, the HOA didn't like that, and were complaining. And we live in a community of about 40 houses. Everybody was up in arms and was waiting for the lady to come back again, pull her out of the car and hang her from an oak tree for doing that to everybody. So everybody got the same letter. So we send in information and talk to them and say, no, this is going to ruin the landscaping. Then people won't buy the house in your next development you're doing. So perhaps you'll be a little understanding. Yeah, right. So they waited and said, well, when it gets warm, you have to cut them off. And then they certainly came around and watched everybody cut them off, okay, the dead parts. So sometimes you have to deal with these people, and that's what you have to do. All right, varmints. These are your plague of being a gardener. Varmints will eat anything, onions, garlic, and hot peppers if they're hungry. Squirrels are my #1 menace. They're really cute tree rats. They are rodents, okay? If you see the rodents in the yard, think of it as a white rat in a lab. That's who they're related to. And why would you want to see those running around your house? But here they are. They're much smarter than humans. They have the same brain size as an alligator, but they're much more intelligent than alligators. Here are another problem. They're cute rats on stilts. And fencing is a must, but you gotta have the right fencing. You can't let the deer see through the fence. So if you have like a metal fence that, you know, with the fence in between, they can see the other side and then decide they can jump it or not. They also want to make sure there's not a wolf, aka dog, on the other side who would object to them being on the property. So if they can't see through the fence, the deer are reluctant to jump it when they don't know what's on the other side. But if they see through your fence, they're jumping, okay? They have adequate intelligence, but they have problems when they see cars, okay? Raccoons are the worst of the bunch. They're incredibly intelligent and very devious. I've had them, for example, in order to get rid of raccoons, I had to trap them and relocate them. Lucky for me, one of my patients' brother was a retired farmer north of Tampa, and at night he would sit on his porch and he'd feed all the wild animals and watch them. Okay, by me. But he was lacking raccoons, and he talked to his brother, who was my patient, and I was complaining to him one day about my raccoons. He says, I got a deal for you. You trap them, I'll transport them for free, and my brother will like the raccoons up there. So over a year and a half, I caught about 35 to 40 raccoons. And on one occasion, I would come out and feed them because the guy didn't come by every day, and water them. And it was great watering raccoons because most wild animals don't like to be bathed because they lose their scent, and they're afraid that when their friends come see them, they won't know who they are, and they'll have a big fight with them. So I would water them and feed them, but I always make sure I got the raccoons really wet, okay? But then I came out one evening to feed them and water them, and I hadn't called the guide, as I called him the next day. I said, I got a raccoon for you, I'm just gonna go out and check first. And the raccoon was gone. And it was a have-a-heart trap. It was hard for humans to open up the have-a-heart traps, but the raccoons solved the problem. And actually, I got a later, after that happened, I set up a little motion camera and watched the raccoon do it. But at the last minute, one of his friends put his butt in the way of the camera, and I couldn't catch the actual opening, but the raccoon was gone. So raccoons can learn how to do that. And they say that raccoons can open doors to your house if it's not locked. Once they see the humans do it a few times, they can pick up on that. So the raccoon walks in your house one day, he was watching. Okay. All right. Several ways to deter them. You can put pepper sprays where they want to be. You can leave out mothballs. Animals don't like mothballs very much. Kitty litter is another thing. Blood meal. Talk radio works really great for a while, but once the animal is fine, there's no human around talking, they ignore it. Fencing is, like I mentioned, very important. Motion detectors with sprinklers attached to them where it aims at the moving object. They're a little expensive, but that bothers the animals. They don't like being wet. Domestic pets. Dogs will chase raccoons, but I'm not sure your dog should be chasing a raccoon. But dogs will definitely chase squirrels, but they can't climb the tree. Cats can chase squirrels and get them on a tree. I've yet to see a domestic cat who is so poorly fed and wanted to chase a squirrel. So cats are not really much of a benefit if they're domestic. And really, it's traps and relocation. Have-a-heart traps are very safe. It's not like the people out west in the old days where they killed all the beaver by trapping them. It's very safe. You just feed them until somebody's ready to pick them up, and the raccoon's very happy. You didn't have to search for food for a couple of days. You have to remember that all the natural repellents that work, the wind, the water, and sunlight eventually grate them, and you got to keep replacing it. All right. Darcy Gott's going to be a lawyer, and one of her possible law firms contacted me about my getting a sort of meeting with the squirrels to solve some problems. The big problem I have with the squirrels is they like my Asian pear trees. And my pear tree is about 30 foot tall. For the past 3 or 4 years, I've had 1 or 2 pears on it that they forgot to eat. But the problem with the squirrels is they don't wait till humans are ready to eat them. They eat them when they're very small, red, and hard. They're so hard that if you hit them with a hammer, you're not sure the hammer's going to break, or the food might be indented slightly. And what they do is they pour about 20 of them into each cheek pouch and then run off, and you can't catch them. And these guys are very smart. They go from tree to tree to tree, but there's one slot they have to be 20 feet on the ground to get to the next tree. So I've sat there waiting for them at times with my hoe, hoping to catch one. I don't say what I would have done with them. And they're just so fast you can't react fast enough. Okay. So we inked the deal here. So the squirrels will protect my greenhouse. So it says this property is protected by highly trained squirrels, not responsible for injuries or possible death. Okay. And they will only take the pears on the top layer of the pear tree. Now, if you think the squirrels are going to do that, they're not. So my backup plan is the hawk family who lives nearby. I don't know if there's mama or daddy hawk. And they sit for free on my roof, and they can eat all the squirrels they want that they can see. So if they don't carry this out, the hawk and I will take care of this problem. Now, the raccoon shirt I'm wearing is trying to convince the raccoons that I like them, even though I don't, and then maybe we could broker some deal. The real problem with the raccoons is they like citrus fruit. So they'll take an orange off the tree at a time when humans can't eat the orange, and they'll take a couple bites and throw it to the ground. So it's like feeding a small child. It takes a couple bites of food and clears the table, and now you have to pick it up again. So they go through a great number of citrus trees. So the idea is that maybe they would be nice and finish the whole citrus before they have another citrus, and we could live compatibly. But I don't think that's going to happen. But I can't wait till a raccoon sees me in that shirt and probably, has a heart attack, hopefully. All right. Okay, some interesting facts about plants. Pineapples. I've been growing pineapples for about 25 years. And I've eaten the same pineapple 10 to 12 times, the same one. Not a genetic experiment, not frozen. When you buy pineapples to eat, you just cut off the top. But if you cut off the top and plant it and leave enough of the fruit on there into a pot, put it outside if you have a protected area, water it, give it some sun. If it's inside, put it near a window. The pineapple in 2 or 3 weeks will absorb all the fruit that's there and start rooting in. And you just pull on a little bit, and if it tugs and doesn't come out, it's going to grow. It takes about 2 years to grow a pineapple. So I've eaten the same pineapple 10 to 12 times. Okay. Miracle fruit is very popular in the Caribbean. It's a small, long, 1-inch long fruit that has absolutely no taste. When you chew them up, about 5 or 6, leave them on your tongue for a while, about 5 minutes, during which time you cannot talk. You want to aspirate them. You then take a raw lemon and eat it raw. And what happens is it tastes like lemonade. You can take a raw lime, eat it raw, it tastes like limeade. Because the enzyme in the miracle fruit inhibits all your taste receptors except sweet. Now, presumably, you eat a hamburger and French fries. I don't know what it tastes like, but I haven't tried that yet. But it's very popular. It's a real neat thing to do to people is eat this, have a raw lemon, and it's a really a nice experience. Shampoo gingers. The original Spanish settlers and the English settlers later on found this plant. We'll show a picture later if we have it time. And basically, it's very, you just look at the plant and say, I need to squeeze this. So they squeeze it out, came out a viscous liquid, very similar to modern shampoos we use now, and they use that as their shampoo, and they named the ginger shampoo ginger. And you still do that today. Gomphocarpus 5 is a carpus. I was a classics major in college, so my Latin came in real handy here. Gompho is basically a nail, okay? So the plant grows like a nail straight up. And physo is like a bladder, okay? And carpus is just a word for a plant. But nobody calls it this. And this is the favorite of all my patients. And if I don't have one on display, I get some feedback. Where is it? Where is it? Why don't you have it? And they brought a friend to look at it. So here it is. It's called hairy balls, okay? This never fails to elicit a laugh, okay? And that's what it is. And people come in, where's the hairy balls? Where is it? And this is what the plant looks like. It's basically a milkweed, a little different from the others in the milkweed. It doesn't exactly grow straight up, it branches a little bit. Little white things are the flowers that'll be the hairy balls, and you can see the hairy balls there. And the hairy balls are just full of air, has a little cottony material to which the black seeds are attached, so it floats off when the hairy ball opens, and the hairy ball just slowly opens over a few days, and then it disintegrates. And then it makes more hairy balls. And it's the greatest thing going. It's like near my greenhouse, what you can't see is I have an outdoor chair propping it up because it's not a very strong plant. And all the hairy balls don't weigh much. There are a lot of hairy balls there. And so the plant and the wind lifts, and if it ever falls over, the stem breaks. It'll grow, being a weed, it'll grow right back in about 2 months. But then you lose your supply of hairy balls. So a lot of my gardening is now trying to space out hairy ball plants so when the first couple go, I've got some more hairy balls to go because the patients get all upset about it. So there we are. So I'm going to stop here and introduce Darcy, who's going to continue the talk.
Yes, so Darcy's going to send us out in our last 15 minutes together. And while she's getting started, we have a little treat for you all in honor of the air plants. My colleague Angela is going to pass out a little air plant for all of you guys to take home, hopefully inspired by the first portion of our talk. And Darcy, if you could just save me 2 minutes at the end, I'll share a couple of IDF resources before we head out today. Thank you.
Perfect. Okay. I'll start out by saying that Dr. Siegel is my immunologist, and I was actually an intern for him when I was a senior in high school. And the very first job that I had was sorting through his flowers to put around the office. He came in with 2 giant bags full of like 300 plus flowers, and he set them on the desk, and he said, sort through these, and I had no idea what I was doing.
Well, I guess you're going to go through yours.
Oh, they may not have changed.
I wonder, yeah.
Sorry. Okay.
What you guys will see is a montage of beautiful plants as Darcy progresses to her portion. These are all images brought by Dr. Siegel.
They're so great. They're
Yes.
all around his office. I love them. Oh, and now his house as well.
Yep, keep going. And there you go.
All right. So this is just a quick thing about us. Like I said, this is actually right before I was going off to college in 2019. He is an allergist and immunologist, and I am a second-year law student at Stetson. I'm also a public policy intern for IDF. My favorite flowers, I love lupin, which grow a lot out in Maine, and they bloom during the spring. I also love lavender, and then another one is black velvet petunias. I was just abroad in France, studying abroad, and I saw them, and I thought they just looked so amazing. Okay, so hydroponic gardening. Is it right for you? Does anybody know what hydroponic gardening is, or have they heard of it? Yeah? Yeah, so basically, hydroponic gardens are soilless gardens, so it's all water. So it's a really good alternative to, say, having like one in soil, especially if you have allergies. So these are just pictures of our favorite flowers. So up in the top left are the black velvet petunias that I found out in Arcachon. Down in the bottom left is me and my brother when we were children in a field of lupin. And then to the right is some lavender out in Newport, Maine. And then at the top right is Dr. Siegel's hairy balls. I'm so sorry. I did not mean to say it that way. Okay, so I'll start off by talking about why I decided to hydroponic garden. So the first one is from my mother. She was the one who first started. What we did was we went to one of my distant relatives' house in Maine, and we saw that. She's been gardening for a long time, and so she started hydroponic gardening after she saw one of our family relatives doing it, and then I started doing it. So I primarily do not grow flowers. I only grow lettuce and greens, and that's because of the lizard on the right. So this is my bearded dragon, Draco. He's about 4 years old, and the primary piece of his diet is greens. So I grow greens in my arrow garden so that I can feed him. So I will just pick them right off my plants and feed them to him by hand, and he certainly loves it. He's never complained, so. Okay, so the pros and cons of hydroponic gardening. There are so many pros that I could talk about. So the first one is, of course, that there's no need for soil and there's no need for mulch. It's really good for people who have soil-based allergies, and it's really good for people who have CGD, who from the IDF handbook, it says that they should probably avoid a lot of mulching. Another thing is I have no need to do any pesticides. All I do is I have my plant food and I have my water, and that's all that I need for my hydroponic gardens. No varmints. There's no cute tree rats or tree rats on stilts if you have an arrow garden because it's all inside. Next, it grows at a faster rate. On the next slide, I have a progression of how my hydroponic garden has grown. Within 3 weeks of growing them, I was able to give the greens to my bearded dragon to eat. It takes up very little space. The one that I have fits right on my counter. It's about the size of this computer. And it also can be done inside. So if you live in a condo like I do or an apartment, it's a way for you to garden without needing to have the actual space for a regular garden. And the last thing is savings on vegetables. Like I said, I grow my greens for my bearded dragon. I have not had to buy any vegetables for him in almost a year because I have my arrow garden. And some of the cons, it is a little bit higher upfront cost. I think it cost me about $150 when I started my current hydroponic gardens, but I have not had to pay anything since because the plants last for over a year. There are limited types of plants that you can grow because they're sitting in basically a giant bucket of water. You wouldn't be able to grow any root-based plants, and you wouldn't be able to grow any trees just because you have a lamp that's overarching over the seeds. And then the other thing is, what happens when there's a power outage? My hydroponic gardens have to be attached to the electricity because the lights automatically turn on and off. We have hurricanes every year, so the question is, what happens when there's a power outage? Well, you just have to sit there and pray that you can get back within a couple days and your plants don't die. So that's what I had to do during the last hurricane. And then there could be an increase in electricity bill only because the hydroponic gardens that I have are plugged in 24/7 and running 24/7. So we have seen a very slight increase in our electricity bill just because of that, but it is very slight. And then the picture on the right is one of my air gardens, and that's my cat, Bruce. He loves to smell the plants. Thankfully, he doesn't eat them, but he always has to be snuck into the IDF stuff. Okay. So like I said, these are the stages of my arrow garden that I have. So on the top left is what it looked like on the very first day that I put my seeds in. By day 7, you could see that everything was sprouting. Day 14, almost doubled in size. And then after a month, those are the size of my lettuce on the bottom right. And I was able to feed him every single day with that. And I always have at least 1 or 2 bags of lettuce on hand in my refrigerator. And just to give you a perspective, this is the size of some of the leaves that I've been able to grow in my hydroponic garden. And I have, right now, because of how big it is, my leaves are actually growing past the lamp, so it's almost probably close to a foot tall. Okay, so now we're going to move on to how you actually have a hydroponic garden. It's pretty simple. You don't need nearly as many supplies as having a regular soil-based garden. So the first thing that you want to do is obviously figure out what your budget is and what exactly you'd want to grow. Do you want to grow food? Do you want to grow root-based things? Do you want to grow plants like the cascading petunias on the left? Do you want to have 6 plants, 12 plants, 3 plants? The next thing is go out and actually buy your garden. I use the Arrow Garden, and you can even get those at Walmart. You can get them at Amazon, and you can get them from the direct website. The next thing that you want to do is read through the instruction manual. It'll give you very rudimentary instructions on exactly what you need to do to keep your plants alive. The next thing that you want to do is fill your hydroponic garden with water and plant food. So down there where you see the silver, that's all water. It's probably 1.5 gallons to 2 gallons of water in there. And when you're first starting out, you'd only need to refill that water, I would say once a week, maybe once every 10 days. But once you start getting bigger flowers like this, especially if you have peppers, you'll probably want to be refilling that AeroGarden every other day to every day. So next, and the plant food, I only have to feed my plants every 2 weeks. So I just take a capful, 2 capfuls of plant food, put it in where the water is, and that's all that I have to do to feed them. The next thing that you want to do is make sure to check your water levels regularly and feed your plants bi-weekly. So like I said, when you first start your plants, you just have the seeds, day 1, day 2. You really don't need to check that water except after maybe a week or 2. But once you start having the big plants where you can start cutting off leaves, you'll want to be checking it almost every other day. When I was gone for 6 weeks in Europe, I made sure to put down for my boyfriend that he needed to make sure to check those plants every other day because I did not want to come home to dead plants. So the next thing is, if you are growing food, you're going to want to what's called pruning it, which is cutting off some of the leaves. So cutting them off once you see that they're big enough to eat and they're ripe, but make sure that you're not cutting the primary stem that it's coming from, and you leave at least 1 or 2 leaves on there so that that one big stem can keep growing leaves. And then just watch your plants grow as you go along. Okay, so the next thing you're probably asking yourself is, well, now that I have my hydroponic garden, what should I be growing? Well, I'm going to give you the answer to almost every single question in law school. It depends. There's a couple of questions that you can kind of ask yourself to figure out what exactly you should be growing. So the first one is, do I want color? Do you want something like the cascading petunias on the other side that has a lot of pretty colors? You'd probably want to do more flowers than you'd want to do food. Like for instance, the microgreens up here or my lettuce, it's all green, so it's all one color. So if you want a lot of colors, maybe that's not the right plant. The next thing is, how many plants do I want to grow at once? Do I want to grow 6 plants at once? Do I want to grow 2 plants at once? And that's primarily because if you want to grow something like peppers or tomatoes, they need a lot of space. So even if you have, say, in your hydroponic garden, 6 spots for 6 different plants, you should really only have 2, maybe 3 tomato plants. Because I'm growing lettuce, do not have that problem, so I'm currently growing 12 different kinds of lettuce at once. The next thing is, do I want to grow something edible? Do I want to grow food, or do I want to grow flowers? The next thing is, how often can I refill the water reservoir? This goes back to peppers. Peppers are going to soak up that water a lot more than other sort of flowers. So am I going to be able to refill it every single day, or am I going to only be able to refill it, say, once every couple days to once a week? And the last and most important question is, do I have pets? There are a lot of plants out there that are toxic to animals. I have 2 cats, a bearded dragon, and a fish. The bearded dragon and the fish don't really matter in terms of this, but I want to make sure I'm not killing my cats with my plants. So if you have cats, you probably don't want to be growing things like tulips or lilies or chrysanthemums. Tulips are also toxic to them, and also rhododendrons. And then if you have bearded dragons and you want to do the same thing that I do, make sure to stay away from chives and rhubarb and things like that. And also onions and garlic are toxic. All right, and then just for the interest, I thought that the flora when I was in France was substantially better than it is in the US. And so I took a lot of pictures. So this is one of the stairways that they had. It was just lined head to toe with different gardens. And this is where I actually first saw the black velvet petunias. And this was the stairway that I would take every single day to go to class. And then this is another one of the plants that they had along that stairwell. And then this is out in front of their city hall. They do have a lot of gardens, and they had this big overarch, and they have a beautiful park that I wish I added some pictures of right near where I was staying. But this is right outside their city hall. So when you exit, this is the first thing that you see. And then this is one of their golf courses that they have out there. I thought it was just absolutely gorgeous with all the surrounding trees and how well the landscaping was done. So I will now hand it back to Dr. Siegel, if he wants to go back to the pictures. So
we're actually down to 5 minutes. So as he's pulling that up, I'm going to share a couple of quick notes from IDF, and then we can spend our last few minutes together looking at some of Dr. Siegel's beautiful work. But the first thing I want to know, and Dr. Siegel, feel free to come on up as I'm chatting. You can go ahead and pull up some photos. I think that would be a lovely way for us to end. Thank you. So the first thing I want to share, and you guys have probably heard this already, but just in case you haven't, if you have any questions related to PI, diagnosis, treatment, we are happy to support you with our Ask IDF platform. We have a resource navigator who will answer your questions directly, and that access is available at primaryimmune.org. We additionally offer our virtual Get Connected groups, which is a great opportunity to connect, receive support, and share experiences with peers in your community. And lastly, my last note before I let Dr. Siegel close this out is to please ensure that you save this in your agenda on your conference app and you take the survey after today. The survey is a really important way for us to understand how we can continue to best serve you guys and make sure that the content is what you all want to see when you come to our event. But let's end the last few minutes with Dr. Siegel. Go ahead.
So I have a morning off once a week and do my personal activities, and then I try to... Okay. So Wednesday mornings I have off, so I try to collect flowers if I'm not doing something else and bring them to the office and we display them. I like roses. The more petals, the better, and the more colors, the better. This looks like an ordinary weed, but in fact it's called the chocolate flower. Look really carefully, there's some dark pollen in there. Put your nose up to it, it smells like chocolate. Doesn't taste like chocolate, but it smells like chocolate. Interesting plant. These are called shrimp plants because they look like shrimp. There's a whole variety of these, different colors. And I'll show you one that is a shrimp plant, doesn't look like a shrimp plant. These are pentas, which butterflies love, 4 different colors that are available. And the bees are always around these. This is a shrimp plant that's not a shrimp plant, doesn't look like one. These are amaryllis, but the thing about these, this is a triple amaryllis. It has 3 layers of flowers. It has 2 different colors and the yellow in the center. I grow so many flowers. One day I decided I got to do something ridiculous. I need to grow a black and white flower here. And it turned out it's very hard to find black and white flowers, even that'll grow in Florida. So this is one, it's a Gerber daisy, white with a black center, and the Gerbers come in many different colors. So it's about the only one that I could find. This is called a cat whisker. I object to this. I think it's called a dog whiskerer plant, but I got overruled. And you can see the little whiskers on the plant at the bottom. This is the shampoo ginger. The actual flower of the ginger is the little yellow appendage there. And normally it gets all red, but when I have to pick these, if I wait it to be all red, it would be the middle of the week, and it would be dead. So pick it. So you could just cut it off, stand it in a little thing like this, and just pour it out periodically and shampoo yourself, which is what the original settlers did. These are gardenias floating. These are called powder puffs. You can see the pollen grains here. And when these come out, they're white, but all the bees, especially the mason bees, are sitting there, and it becomes a black and white flower. So when I cut these, I have to stand in line to wait the bees to move and free up a flower. Now, it's curious, every once in a while you see the bees come. They fall asleep in flowers when they've had enough of the nectar, and they have to sleep it off. They fall asleep, so you've got to be real careful when you bring in the flowers. You don't release one inside. This is a calla lily with the pollen sitting there. Double amaryllis with a white band around it. More petals for roses. This is called the shell ginger. You can see in the back they look like little shells with a little imagination. They open up, and you can see the little white thing is the pollen grains that the plant wants to stick on the bee. You have to remember that insects have very good ultraviolet vision that we don't have, but they have very poor red and red vision, infrared vision. So this looks black to the bees and actually looks like an arrow pointing to the bee where to come. So a lot of plants use this strategy. These are criniums, and to the bees it would be white and black because the red would be black. Instead of, you would think the bees would go to the center, but the crinium decided to put their pollens on these long sticks out. So I don't know why the crinium did that, but that's the way they are. This is an African iris, and this would look very intense blue because they have great blue vision, insects, and it would tell the insect exactly where to land to get it. So the plant's trying to help the stupid bee. These are gardenias mixed with roses, another amaryllis, a triple one. It's another rose. This is my gardenia bush outside my house, and when it blooms, you can be 30 feet away and smell all the gardenias. Really fabulous. Of course, you don't like gardenias. You don't want to be near this thing. My favorite color is actually blue, but it's very hard to find blue flowers in any zone to a great extent. So I planted some out front, even though my front garden is all white, so because I like the blue color, and there's some white irises in there as well. And here's some in another location. These are Mexican sunflowers. Now we hear things like Mexican, French, English. A lot of times they're false because in the 1900s they were trying to sell flowers from the mid-United States to the people on the East Coast and called them all these various foreign names. So a lot of the names are wrong, but this is actually from Mexico. It's a tree that grows about 20 foot tall. And every 4 to 6 weeks it puts hundreds of these blooms out, which the bees can't stay away from. And all you hear is a gentle hum of the mason bees as they're working.
Dr. Siegel, I think that has to be our finale flower. I think that's our ending one, the Mexican sunflower. Do you want to put it back up? We can land on it. Guys, let's give these people a round of applause. This is great.